All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here this evening. Both those of you who are here in person and those who are watching on the live stream. My name is Kaylin Nicholson. I'm an organizer with Workers Strike Back, the nationwide organization that Kshama Sawant co-founded, and I'm a longtime collaborator of her on many of her campaigns here in Seattle. And I'm honored to be able to support her campaign to become the first revolutionary socialist in the US Congress. As a revolutionary socialist, Kshama supports the call for Puerto Rican working people's right to independence from the United States and their right to self-determination. Tragically, the leadership of the vast majority of left organizations in the United States haven't even taken a meaningful stand or public position on this, just as they've failed to wage a serious fight back against the growing cost of living crisis facing working people in the 50 states or the imperialist wars being waged in the Middle East. The truth is that for working people anywhere to win improvements in our living standards, we need to join together nationally and internationally in a united fight back against the same billionaire class who are profiting from all of our exploitation. That billionaire class, which funds both the Democratic and Republican parties, is increasingly using Puerto Rico as a playground and a tax haven for their massive wealth at the expense of the working people in Puerto Rico, who have been facing colonization, oppression, and exploitation at the hands of the American and Western capitalist class for more than a century. Kshama's independent campaign for US Congress is fighting for the right of Puerto Rican people to self-determination, the canceling of all Puerto Rican debt, make Wall Street pay instead, abolishing Puerto Rican tax haven laws for the rich, and free health care for all in the US, including Puerto Rico, paid for by taxing the rich. We are so honored. We are so honored to be able to organize this meeting together with members of the Puerto Rican diaspora community and to be joined by activists from the Puerto Rican Independence Party of the Diaspora. And we also wanted to thank Mi Patria, a Seattle-based Puerto Rican restaurant, for the wonderful pastries that they've donated for our event. So our first speaker this evening is going to be Jenaro Abraham. Jenaro is the assistant professor of political science at Gonzaga University and an incoming professor at San Jose State University. He's also the vice president of the Puerto Rican Independence Party in the Diaspora. So please join me in welcoming Jenaro.
All right, how's everyone today? Nice to see so many new faces and also very familiar faces as well. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Jenaro Abraham. I teach at Gonzaga. I hang out in Seattle, and I've got a lot of great friends here. And I'm glad to have made another friend here in Kshama. I want to start this off by thanking Kshama for agreeing to champion these important causes of the Puerto Rican people. These are causes that are very hard to explain. They're very hard to explain to a lot of people in the United States, in part because I think in the settler colonial project we live in, it masks all forms of oppression. They're very hard to see sometimes how this, the things that we think of as democratic virtues are often instrumentalized to exploit others abroad, right? It's one of the reasons why we need international solidarity for causes like Puerto Rico, for causes like things that the Palestinian people have suffered, and other causes that are adjacent to ours and the things we care about. So, thank you, Kshama. It's a real honor to be here with you and be able to walk with you in these causes. So, I like to begin my presentation or this intervention by answering a very simple question: why should Puerto Rico be independent, right? And I guess it's worth then explaining what Puerto Rican colonialism looks like. So we just have to be honest about it first. Puerto Rico is a colony. And I know that a colony in the contemporary world sounds strange. It looks strange. We often associate it with some of the more coercive forms of politics that we've seen in societies that have come before us and with political institutions that have come before us. And because of it, it's hard to imagine what that might look like, right? But it's not a metaphor, it's not rhetorical. You know, Puerto Rico is a colony. It is a classical colony by design. And in a lot of senses, it garners dynamics that are very different from the settler colonial model that we live on right now, and which makes it much harder to explain. So it was intended to continue as a colony from the very moment it changed hands from the Spanish Empire to the U.S. Empire. After the United States invaded Puerto Rico in 1898 during the Spanish-American War, the U.S. Political elites openly discussed Puerto Rico as a possession to be administered and controlled. It was Senator Henry Cabot Lodge, one of the principal architects of American expansionism or U.S. expansionism. He stated clearly in a telegraph given to the Secretary of Navy, future President Theodore Roosevelt, that, and I quote, "I earnestly hope that no truce will be granted and that peace will only be made on the consideration of Cuba being independent, Puerto Rico ours, and the Philippines taken away from Spain." As you can all clearly appreciate, the intention was never to extend the virtues of American democracy to Puerto Rico, but rather take it for extraction. That was the intention from the beginning. And it was one to consolidate, funny enough, the settler colonial project here. It was a classical colonial project that was made to consolidate the expansionist one here, which makes it a very interesting laboratory to understand what American coercion, American political violence looks like abroad. So all this happened during a broader expansionist moment in U.S. history. It happened during the same era where Hawaii was annexed, where in the Thousand Days War was being had in Colombia, which eventually allowed the United States to carve out of a piece of it and help create the nation that we know as Panama, for the sole intention of controlling the commercial routes through the development of a canal. And it was at the same time where the United States was looking to be a global superpower, where it's industrially it was ahead of the game, and it hadn't faced many of the violences that other, I guess, new nations had to endure when it came to their own anti-colonial movements, right? So Puerto Rico became a part of this project in part because of its geography. It was fitting for the United States to turn it into a military bastion to control the economic interests of the Caribbean basin and Latin America. And it's also one of the reasons why why Spain, once it was in control of Puerto Rico, made it basically a military bastion and did not develop its economy in meaningful ways for the Puerto Rican people. So under U.S. rule, which has been about, I think, 128 years, if I'm not mistaken, 1898, there were several iterations of colonial rule, right? Colonial rule looked different over time. As interests changed, the political institutions themselves changed. So the first cycle was under the sugar plantation economy, where there was already a sugar economy in place, but the United States revamped it, they industrialized it, and they displaced a series of smallholders and like maybe medium-sized holders of the sugar economy. And they turned Puerto Rico's economy into a mono cultivation, right? A monoculture, where they're only exporting sugar for the greater part, about 30 years. And with that, the economy was designed just to take from Puerto Ricans. It shoehorned a lot of peasants into this new capitalist industries, all the while displacing hundreds of thousands of Puerto Ricans to the United States. And some of the first then migration waves of Puerto Ricans coming to the United States, coming to New York, happened right there at the cusp of 1920, 1930, when the economy itself, the sugar economy, was then in decline. And it was the independence movement itself that was a challenge to these big interests, right? It was the independence movement that was a challenge to the economic interests of the large sugar conglomerates. Then a second cycle of this colonial iteration happened, which was one of industrialization. It happened mainly during the post-war period. It was one that was emboldened by a project known as Operation Bootstrap. It was a program that was presented to Puerto Ricans as like a form of modernization, as something that would give Puerto Ricans the ability to have all kinds of things that you'd see in the quote-unquote mainland. Not our mainland, for sure. And it was one that was done by inviting corporations to benefit from a tax haven model that continues to burden us today. The tax havens have, models themselves have changed over time as well, but they garner the same seeds of what neoliberalism really emanates from. It emanates from imperial rule. The only difference is that because of the fact that Puerto Rican elites were always subservient to imperial powers, what we had is this dynamic where you never had to impose a Chilean dictator. You never had to impose Videla. You never had to impose these things from afar. As we know, neoliberalism is always imposed from above, and that's why we have to fight back. So, again, this model produces enormous social dislocation. Traditional agricultural communities were destroyed. Massive urban migration happened, and people were moved to the United States. And hundreds of thousands of people went to New York, to Chicago, to Hartford, Connecticut, to Philadelphia, and to some other like urban hamlets and even rural spaces through migrant labor programs to send Puerto Ricans away. And the cause of that was twofold. On the one hand, it was to provide the United States, by admission of elites themselves, with a reserve army of laborers here in the United States to continue to feed the capitalist monster that it is, and at the same time to rid Puerto Rico of the social pressures that were actually fighting back against the capitalist class, which happened to be the same people that believe in colonial rule. This was the wedding of these two things. It happened from the beginning, right? Colonialism and capitalism were one and the same for Puerto Rico. And more importantly, this industrial model made Puerto Rico completely dependent on US trade. It destroyed all of our ability to actually subsist and create our own economy and to think about our other things that really, to think about an economy that would help us, embolden the things that we care about. And finally, come the neoliberal era, after 1973, the oil crisis and the invasion of the Sinai Peninsula and all of these international things that were weighing down on the working class heavily in the United States and around the globe, Puerto Rico then turned to, or kind of dove deeper into what would eventually become neoliberal economic policies. Not only did they start inviting corporations through the tax haven model, they started providing, through a loophole in the IRS tax code, the ability for companies to launder money through what you call intellectual property laws. And with that, the pharmaceuticals came flocking to Puerto Rico. So, has anyone here like lived in Detroit before?
Yeah.
Detroit. Yes. Do you have people in the auto industry? Do you have people like in your family in the auto industry or anything?
Oh my gosh, my mother, yeah,
Yes.
My whole career, my whole life.
Well, in Puerto Rico, the auto industry is the pharmaceutical industry. If you want to get a decent job, that's a place you can get it. Otherwise, you're really stuck, or you have to migrate, right? You have to come to the United States. It's the only way out. And funny enough, we have a very similar fate that Detroit has when it comes to its own debt management, right? What this ended up doing was creating this, at one point or another, Puerto Rico produced 60% of the over-counter medicine that was consumed in the United States. And what does that mean? Well, it means that a lot of the stuff was being produced there, but none of the money stayed because all through a tax incentive law. So there was a semblance of progress and modernization, but once those tax loopholes were closed, the real underbelly of the project showed its ugly face, right? And when it showed its ugly face, it did so in ways that, well, meant that Puerto Ricans, everyday Puerto Ricans, had to bear the brunt of the colonial model. We did it through migrating. We did it through just simply having our properties, right, being sold for pennies on the dollar. And from 1990 to about 1990 to the present, Puerto Rico experienced a decline in its population of about 4.2 million to 3.2 million people. And with it, all the youth went. Most of the people my generation and even Alejandro's generation, if they have a title, they leave. There's no opportunities there. The whole colonial model is then made, and it's by design, to rid Puerto Rico of its possibility of being independent, to rid of its possibility of actually confronting the powers that be, and to ultimately continue to serve the beast that is this colonial project, right? So in a lot of senses, I would like to reiterate, the independence movement itself is the biggest social movement in Puerto Rico. It is the social movement that has always challenged the status quo. It has always been an incubator of radical thought. It is the place where socialists have found a common ground and home with like the causes that all Puerto Ricans care about. And it's the social movement that, as of now, is the biggest social movement and the fastest growing political movement of the present. This didn't happen, though, because we cared about organizing. It happened because of crises, right? A lot of it had to do with Puerto Ricans realizing it's either we have to organize or this project is going to do away with us. It's doing away with our communities. 6 million Puerto Ricans live in the United States and 3.2 live in Puerto Rico. A lot of people have a revolving door kind of relationship with Puerto Rico, but what ends up happening is that it creates a situation where Puerto Ricans can't develop themselves in meaningful ways in Puerto Rico. They can't do it. The only real opportunity that we have to actually succeed with our families, and you have actually be able to maybe buy a house or raise children or any of the things that people actually aspire to in their lives or simply follow their career, it's moving to the heart of the empire. It's a tragic situation, but it's one that we have had to endure, and it's one of the reasons why the youth movement in Puerto Rico now supports independence. It is the primary political position and the favored status option of the youth, right? Most of Puerto Rican politics is organized around, given the colonial situation, the relationship that people want with the United States. There's a pro-statehood party, for example. There's a pro-status quo party. There's other parties that are like single-issue parties. And our party, the Independence Party, which has been a historic home to many, radical movements, but also movements that simply want to challenge the status quo in meaningful ways because they see their communities being destroyed. We've been that home. And we have found now in the diaspora, living, studying here, a cultural renaissance of Puerto Ricans standing up, finding new ways to connect with Puerto Rico, finding new ways to think about what it means to be Puerto Rican. And given the fact that this two-party system, this duopoly, has not been able to provide the working class with real answers to their political and economic problems, Puerto Ricans are looking to Puerto Rico again. And they're saying, what can our island and our nation tell us about the status quo? And that's why independence being emboldened as the majority position in Puerto Rico. I want to end briefly with a comment about how this isn't something that is, I think as Marxist-Leninists, as internationalists, this isn't a position necessarily that comes out of nowhere. Puerto Rican independence itself isn't something that was developed in a void, right? It wasn't that someone just woke up and said we want to be independent. It happened because of the fact that the capitalist economic project that is the United States and Puerto Rico created conditions that are unbearable, that make us poorer than the state of Mississippi, that has shot up our inequality higher than any other state in the United States. It has created a situation where doctors have left, where teachers have left, where we have a real void in what we need to create a healthy society. And that's why we need people like Kshama and anyone else willing to stand up to the powerful capitalist class to help walk with us and move with us, standing shoulder to shoulder as we bring down the colonial project that is the United States and Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico, as a military bastion under the Spanish, had it was a huge military garrison to protect Spanish interests. Under the United States, during the Cold War, and even up until the 1990s, there were 16 military bases. Puerto Rico is an island by 100 by 35 miles. It is one that is completely militarized, and it's being remilitarized to attack our brothers and sisters in Venezuela, to also to threaten our brothers and sisters in Cuba, and to ultimately carry out interests that have nothing to do with our own well-being. Puerto Ricans serve disproportionately in the military, as many minoritized groups do, and at the same time, we have no say in anything that happens in our own island. If not, we are forced to kind of endure the conditions that put us in that situation to begin with, if not be a part of their perpetuation. So I want to just end this by thanking Kshama for championing these causes, for being a real hero to the working classes here in Seattle, but hopefully for the rest of the country. And if you ever need anything from us, from the independence movement, from other working groups in Puerto Rico, and to the movements that are adjacent to us, you have a home, you have friends, and thank you for being a friend of the Puerto Rican people. So, I'll end with that.
Thank you so much, Jenaro. Our next speaker will be Alejandro Tañon. Alejandro is the Secretary of Youth Affairs for the Puerto Rican Independence Party in the Diaspora. Please welcome Alejandro.
Hello. Okay. Thank you all for being here. We're appreciative to have you all here. Want to hear about our struggle, Kshama, for opening the space to hear our voices, letting us speak, and supporting this struggle. It is very, very important, and it's connected to so many other struggles that you fight for, and the working class is fighting for, and helping us make these connections of how these are interconnected and why we have to champion all of them together to be able to achieve victory. But what I want to talk about today, I think Jenaro gave an amazing historical context for our struggle and the colonial situation in Puerto Rico. But I want to talk a bit more about the experience of growing up in Puerto Rico as a colonial subject, how that shapes your understanding of your reality. And I want to start with when I grew up in Puerto Rico. I have moved here to the United States. I've been here for around 5 years, so I feel like I'm part of this new wave of the diaspora. There's many diasporas that have been here for generations. Other came following disasters, or their economic conditions just made it impossible to live at home. And I want to say, in the education system in Puerto Rico, growing up, learning with all your peers, you don't really learn your history. It's not in the interest of the state to have people understand their colonial history, the way their country has developed and been kind of pushed down by this colonial empire. And it's something that's just pushed aside. You learn very basic, very broad things about what happened, but you don't really get to understand the intricacies of what it means. And at least for me, I feel like for many people, you go many parts of your life without really understanding this until you're forced to, because of the conditions of where you live, things that happen to you that make you face front with the problems of the colonial project. And for me, yeah.
Speak a little bit louder, the live stream.
Okay. Yeah. How is this? Yeah, it's just not. Okay. So for me, I had two moments that I think were very important in my life, and for many people in Puerto Rico, that kind of made us tackle these problems face on. And one of them was Hurricane Maria in 2017. I was in high school at the time, and hurricane comes, it devastates Puerto Rico. I was out of power, no electricity, no water. For many months, wasn't able to go to school. I couldn't leave my house because the trees were blocking the roads. And that was one of the first times I was able to actually talk with my community, people that lived around me, and kind of understand the struggles that we're all facing together. And the government response to this was very lackluster. Many months later, it came out that the government was hiding aid, that wasn't distributing it to the people. And many of the contracts that were given to kind of repair infrastructure, make sure that people's homes were repaired, the money was there so they could fix the roofs that have flown away. These contracts were given to multinational foreign corporations that just went there to try to make a quick buck and try to line their pockets without actually doing what was needed to actually help the people. There are still many places in Puerto Rico that still don't have a roof because the money never arrived. It just came to a select few that were able to have the contacts, and the rest were just forgotten. And besides that, additional to that, I don't know if you guys have heard about the book Shock Doctrine by Naomi Klein. It talks about disaster capitalism, the way capitalism takes advantage of natural disasters or big of wars or disasters that happen at different places. And when those things happen, prices drop because, well, people have to leave. People are not able to afford living where they are. And capitalists come and they buy things in this reduced prices. And that happened in Puerto Rico. After Hurricane Maria came, many people had to leave because they couldn't afford staying there. They didn't have their houses, or their families needed medical services that were not available in the island. Then many multimillionaires, rich people from the United States, came to Puerto Rico and bought up that land, bought up those houses, and started this process of gentrification and displacement. Then the government in turn was the government of Ricardo Rosselló. And 2 years after Hurricane Maria in 2017, there is this chat that gets leaked from Ricardo Rosselló. And in it, it's like many conversations between him and many of his aides, people in his government. And it was things that were incredibly shocking that nobody had seen from the main, the governor of the island. And you go through the list of comments that were being said. It's a lot of homophobic comments, misogynistic comments, then comments making fun of the people that had died in the hurricane, really like depraved stuff. And then there's one comment that like I think really spoke to me and shifted like many things of the way I understood my country, which is one of his aides, this like executive of some company, he's a Puerto Rican executive, and he says, "I see the future. It is beautiful. There are no Puerto Ricans." And when you start thinking about this, like how can a person say like such like, well, one is like genocidal language, but then it is a Puerto Rican saying these things. And that is when you start to like realize and you like concretize that the political class in Puerto Rico is not there for the benefit of the Puerto Rican people. It's not there for our interest. It is there to uphold the colonial system. It is there to benefit itself from the colonial project, continue the project, and kind of create this extraction. There are representatives of the empire in the colony. They are not there for us. And that is when you start trying to learn more about your history, because you're like, well, this is insane. Like, I want to learn more about this history that was never taught when I was at school. And you start learning about this, and you learn the projects of mass sterilization against the women of Puerto Rico, because the United States thought Puerto Ricans were too dirty. We couldn't keep reproducing. We were too many. You learn that the birth control pill was tested in Puerto Rico with Puerto Rican women without their consent. You learn about this doctor that was in Puerto Rico, and he injected cancer into his women patients without them knowing. And then as you keep digging more, you learn that the whole relationship with the United States and Puerto Rico is one of extraction. As Jenaro put it very beautifully, we see how that extraction has just shifted throughout time, but the basis of extraction has never left. We started with the sugar plantations, creating the monoculture, destroying the economy of Puerto Rico and making it dependent only on sugar. Then you had the United States gives Puerto Ricans citizenship, and that is now praised as like something, oh, like they're citizens, they're like getting closer rights, but that was actually done so that Puerto Ricans could be drafted into the army to serve at the 2 world wars. And Puerto Ricans were in the army were sent what was called like suicide battalions. These battalions that were made from black and Puerto Ricans to just sent to die in this like suicide missions. And then some of those missions were actually successful. And now these people are praised as heroes, but they're not heroes because they did something great. They were heroes because they were not expected to survive, and they did. And then follow that forward to the mid of the 20th century. And then the colonial situation in Puerto Rico seems to shift. People like the Commonwealth, the current status that Puerto Rico has, gets established in 1952. But this is not given just because the United States wanted to do something good for Puerto Rico, or they just like thought like, you know, like we did something bad before, let's remedy it, let's do this. No, it's like at the time there's a very strong independence movement, and the United States felt it had to do something or it was gonna lose its colony. So they decided to give Puerto Rico its own form of government. They can elect the representatives, they can elect the governor, and they draft a constitution. But the United States made sure that in that constitution, the utmost priority of the Puerto Rican government and its revenue was to repay its government bonds to the United States. has to repay its debt to the U.S. before funding its public service, before attending to the needs of their people. The main thing was just to pay that money off to the United States. Nothing else mattered. But that gave an impression of we're no longer a colony. We have this new relation. We're actually partners in this situation. And that sham can be seen now as time has gone on, as different crises have hit Puerto Rico. And then I think my generation, Jenaro was talking about, the youth, we've lived kind of the brunt of this reality. Puerto Rico's government goes bankrupt. They default on their $73 billion debt to the United States. And in 2015, but this crisis has been like building up since like the early 2000s. So then in 2016, Obama imposes the Fiscal Oversight and Management Board, which is a board that its purpose is to manage Puerto Rico's finances so that it can repay off this debt. And how do they do this? They started doing this by imposing a lot of austerity measures against the public education system. They privatized the highways, privatized the energy grid now. And this board is not a board that is elected by the Puerto Rican people. It is a board that is imposed by the United States. And this board has veto power over the government of Puerto Rico. So it has kind of opened the veil from the sham of what the Commonwealth was supposed to be, like this, like, oh no, we have the best of both worlds. We're like, we have some stuff from our independent country, but we're still connected to the United States. Actually, it shows like how we have actually no power. We have no political agency, because this board that is put here kind of shows that actually this entire time, the United States had the ability to do whatever it wanted with us, to move us to whatever direction it wanted us to, because it has us acting in its interest. If we do something that is not in its interest, it'll put its force to push us to another direction. That is what we're seeing now with this fiscal board that's called La Junta by Puerto Ricans. And even more recently, we can see that this law was declared, it's all called the Act 60, which creates this new tax haven status for multimillionaire foreigners to move to Puerto Rico and only pay 4% in taxes. What this has caused is many multimillionaires from the United States, many people involved in crypto, in tech, move to Puerto Rico to not pay taxes and then buy up land. And they've bought up different parts around the coast, start displacing many communities. They tend to go to a lot of poor communities, buy up their land, and then start displacing, evicting people, kind of pushing people inside the island. There's this very famous case of an elder woman called Ramona. She has this house in the south of Puerto Rico, that a house she's lived for her entire life that was built by her grandfather. And recently, this corporation bought up the land where her house is and is now trying to evict her, saying, well, you don't actually have a title for this land. We have the claims for this land, so you can't be living here. But she doesn't have the titles for the land because when her grandfather built the house, there were no land titles. That didn't exist yet. That came after the establishment of the government. So we can see how all this trajectory of extraction has been pushing people out and forcing horrible economic conditions that has created this big diaspora that Jenaro talked about, that have come in all these different waves. And it's people that maybe are not able to stay because they can't really afford their house. They're getting evicted. Puerto Rico is an aging population. A lot of the youth has left, and medical services are not available. A lot of brain drain is happening because people get educated in Puerto Rico. They can't really find access to a stable job, a job that is able to give them what they want to do, and they have to leave. It's like, well, they find better opportunities, better paying jobs. And our fight for independence is a fight for a country where we have that political agency, a country where we can steer our own destinies and decide what we want to do and act in the interest of our people, not in the interest of a foreign nation. And we have seen this lack of political sovereignty, as we mentioned recently. This fiscal board has veto power over our own government. Puerto Ricans didn't have military bases in the past 2 decades because in the 2000s, they were able to expel many of their military bases after confronting the Navy in the island of Vieques. Vieques is one of the islands in the archipelago of Puerto Rico, which for many, many years was used as training grounds for the U.S. Navy. Even while people were living there, they would have testing grounds for drop bombs, tested all their new equipment, creating the highest rates of cancer in all U.S. territories. And it was up until one of these bombs kills a security guard that was working at this base that the Puerto Rican people said, "Oh, no more. This is not. This is too much." And it was an outpour of support and attacks against the U.S. Navy, which this mass mobilization, mass movement, public support forced the United Congress to take action. And this drive of the Puerto Rican people made the Congress push the Navy to leave and get the Navy out of the island of Vieques. And this serves as an example, it serves as a blueprint for how we achieve our independence. It is not gonna come because Congress decides, oh, it's time we leave Puerto Rico, we've been here long enough. No, it's gonna come because the Puerto Rican people and the people in the United States are gonna be able to create that mass of support, that mass of political power that an organized people can make that will force the U.S. into action, that will force the United States out of Puerto Rico. Thank you.
Thank you, Alejandro. Our next speaker is Kshama Sawant. Kshama is a socialist who has gone to war for working people for over a decade in Seattle and nationally. She used her Seattle City Council office to launch and lead movements to win the nation's highest minimum wage. It's $21.30, I think, today. To win the Amazon tax on the wealthiest corporations in the city, which raises hundreds of millions of dollars for affordable housing every year. And to win many historic renters' rights laws that the landlord lobby is still trying to figure out how to get rid of today. As a city council member, she took home only the average wage of the workers in her district and donated the rest after taxes to labor union strike funds and other movements of working people. And now she is running for Congress, and if elected, she would be the first ever independent revolutionary socialist in U.S. Congress. Please welcome Kshama Sawant.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Also, everyone who's joining us from the live stream. Thank you specifically to the Puerto Rican Independence Party in the Diaspora and Jenaro Abraham and Alejandro Tañon. So thank you so much for this joint meeting that we're able to do and for your remarks. For working people, and Jenaro and Alejandro have already indicated this, but for working people to win any improvements in our living standards, we need to build national and international solidarity on a working class basis. That also means that working people in the 50 states of America and the working people of Puerto Rico need to get united and fight together against the same billionaire class. And I hope this discussion will clarify to working class people in the United States who may not be that familiar with Puerto Rico about why they should care about this issue, because this is very much interlinked with their own liberation as well. And as our speakers have already explained, working people in Puerto Rico have a long history since the late 1800s and even before that of facing colonization, oppression, and exploitation at the hands of the American and Western capitalist class, and obviously the Spanish imperialists before that. And since Puerto Rico was invaded by the American military forces in 1898, the American ruling class has used, as was said, the island as its personal, military, and now financial playground. This has meant now, it meant proliferation of American military bases, but now it means resource grabs by the wealthy and continuing 120 years of impoverishment and economic devastation of the people there. and the impact of neocolonialism, neoliberalism, and capitalism as a whole are all too evident today. Puerto Rico faces a horrific poverty rate of over 43%, and nearly 60% of children live in poverty. And the economy as a whole in the island has been basically in a recession since 2003. I mean, this is just a shocking economic collapse and crisis. And as Alejandro mentioned, in the wake of the powerful Hurricane Maria in 2017, Puerto Rico's agriculture, industry, and electricity and other infrastructure were left in complete disarray. And the American multimillionaires, the billionaires, they saw this as an opportunity to make yet another killing. Among other things, the billionaire class rapidly privatized the island's publicly owned power grid, transferring operations to profit-making companies like Luma Energy, and robbing the Puerto Rican working class and poor by indiscriminately raising electricity rates. And I'm mentioning this because there's a lot of global context for all of this. But just before coming to that, I mean, obviously, the Hurricane Fiona also happened in 2022, that in the context of Luma making profits. And nearly 250,000 people were left without power for over 2 weeks since Hurricane Fiona happened. But the path to privatizing the electricity grid and other industries was made by none other than Democratic President Barack Obama. Alejandro talked about how the Barack Obama era law, in 2016, called the Puerto Rico Oversight, Management, and Economic Stability Act. It sounds kind of nice. Economic stability sounds nice, but it really was another wave of neoliberalism, this law called PROMESA, and the board that was appointed is appropriately known among Puerto Ricans as La Junta, because this is a continuation of the colonial project, and it took away, the La Junta and PROMESA took away most of whatever little autonomy the Puerto Rican people had, and it made a breakthrough for the capitalist class, opening up the avenues for massive privatization. And La Junta has also enacted severe austerity measures and has the legal right to deny unionized utility workers their right to strike. So as I said, PROMESA and La Junta, this is nothing short of a colonial project. And let's not forget, it was championed by a Democratic President, Barack Obama. And in fact, at that time, Hillary Clinton also piped up and said how much she supports that. But it is not unique. What has happened, unfortunately for us, unfortunately for the working class, what has happened in Puerto Rico is far from unique. When I was reading about all this, it reminded me of the Enron crisis in the United States. And it's not only the Enron crisis in the United States that happened in the 1990s. At that same time, also, what was happening was the privatization. And this is bizarre for me, being an immigrant in the United States. But at that same time, there was also what was happening was the privatization of the public electricity infrastructure in my home state of Maharashtra in India, where Mumbai, the city where I grew up, is located. The public utility of my state was sold on the cheap to Enron, General Electric, and Bechtel corporations, and it resulted in massive disaster, complete devastation of the infrastructure, the publicly built infrastructure. The local economies were saddled with billions of dollars of debt, and billions of dollars. And imagine what a crisis it is for the people there. And it meant anytime there is public debt or sovereign debt, we know who pays that debt. It is working class people and poor people who pay that debt. And that is what the Enron and other corporations left in their wake. And meanwhile, the Enron billionaires and multimillionaires, the Bechtel multimillionaires, they all got all kinds of bailouts and financial parachutes. The same type of daylight robbery by the rich, except on a far grander scale, also happened in Greece. We saw what the Troika, the European Commission, the European Central Bank, and the International Monetary Fund, what they did. It was usurious, very high interest and exploitative interest loans in exchange for implementation of cruel austerity policies. It basically meant the complete destruction and evisceration of the Greek economy, torching public pensions, creating massive unemployment, slashing the minimum wage, and carrying out massive privatization of the key industries. All of this, I wanted to mention all of this because if you look at example after example, you see that what is happening in Puerto Rico and what has happened is part and parcel of the global system of capitalism, which treats our resources and our lives as working class people and poor people as completely dispensable in their endless quest for profits and wealth. And so we have to understand, one of the major crises in Puerto Rico is the debt crisis. Puerto Rico supposedly owes at least $70 billion, maybe more, in debt. And who owes it? Obviously, technically, it is the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. But in actuality, this debt lies on the shoulders of the most already exploited people. And so we have to understand this type of debt that is shoved on the shoulders of working and poor people is happening all over. This is, as I said, it happened on a huge scale in Greece as well. And so it's important for us to understand the economic process by which this so-called debt gets collected. The source of the debt is exploitation in the first place. It is the privatization, the systematic economic attacks on the living standards of ordinary people. So all of this creates profits for a few individuals at the top. But what that ends up doing is denuding properties. They never went, none of those properties went back to the working class or the middle class. They were all sold on the cheap at pennies to private equity, so-called private equity, which is just another name for billionaires and multimillionaires that are making a killing on Wall Street. And so you see over and over again examples of economic ravaging, and by the way, this also includes the ravaging of struggling small businesses as well. And so people have gone more and more into private debt, like student debt, credit card debt, medical debt in the United States, plus at the same time being saddled with massive amounts of taxation, because we have regressive taxation on the whole. In other words, we are not only paying interest on these loans that we are forced to take on our private lives, because that is the only way we can survive. If you look at credit card debt, people use credit card debt just to get by from month after month. That's what most of credit card debt is. And then on top of that, we are forced to pay off larger and larger amounts of the so-called public debt or national debt. And this has happened again and again and again. And all it means is what's being called accurately an economic death spiral. And it never ends. Right now, just taking Puerto Rico's example, it is being made worse. We just heard about how there are now many new laws, like Article 60, nakedly favoring the ultra-rich. And Puerto Rico has increasingly been used as a wealth tax haven for billionaires like crypto investors. And they literally, the tax incentive that they have is no federal personal income taxes, no capital gains tax, and there are favorable business taxes without having to renounce your American citizenship. So now you have more than 5,000 crypto traders, real estate developers, and other ultra-rich Americans who have moved to the island since 2012. And these people, you won't believe this. I mean, this is absolutely daylight robbery. They pay about maybe 3% taxes overall. From what I've read, maybe in actuality, they don't even pay that much. While the local people, working class and poor people, they pay up to 36% tax rate. I mean, if this is not a crime, I don't know what is. But look at the kind of billionaires we're talking about. The total market capitalization of all crypto assets right now is approximately $3.3 trillion, with Bitcoin alone accounting for roughly 64% of that total. We're talking about just massive, obscene amounts of money based on what? Basically nothing. It's empty. All of that is empty. And I just wanted to read out a couple of quotes. These are quotes from people, these Bitcoin, or other crypto billionaires or blockchain multimillionaires who've moved to Puerto Rico. One of those guys is Halsey Minor. When he was talking about Hurricane Maria and all the, rapacious plundering that happened after Hurricane Maria, he says, So this multimillionaire says, this really nice guy, he says, while it was really bad for the people of Puerto Rico, in the long term, it's a godsend if people are able to look past that. Another guy, another nice guy, Mr. Nice Guy, I think his name is Matt Clemenson. He's also some sort of blockchain multimillionaire. He says, we are benevolent capitalists building a benevolent economy in Puerto Rico. And he says, Puerto Rico has been this hidden gem, this enchanted island that's been consistently overlooked and mistreated. Maybe 500 years later now we can make it right. No, absolutely fucking not. No multimillionaire or billionaire is going to make anything right. We as the working class, the oppressed, the exploited, we face nothing but the race to the bottom for all workers. And the flip side of that logic is that solidarity by American working people, on American mainland, with the working class in Puerto Rico means we strengthen working class movements here and everywhere. And that is why it is so important to have working class-based principled solidarity across national boundaries and across other divisions. And our campaign for the US Congress, again, is the only one calling for any of these demands. And again, in the relation to Puerto Rico, our campaign is the only campaign in this midterm election that is fighting for the right of Puerto Rican people to self-determination and independence, for canceling the Puerto Rican debt to make Wall Street pay, abolishing Puerto Rican tax haven laws for the rich, and you've heard me say, we are fighting for free healthcare for all funded by taxing the rich. Well, let's make it very clear, which we always meant, but we want to make it explicitly clear. When we say free healthcare for all, we mean free healthcare for all in the US, including in Puerto Rico, by taxing the rich. And it's also extremely crucial for us to understand that as we build a movement for the independence of Puerto Rico, not just self-determination, but independence, and we strongly, as Marxists, as revolutionary socialists, we strongly support the right to self-determination and independence of all oppressed peoples, including Puerto Rican people. But it's also important for us to recognize that that liberation is not going to come on the basis of capitalism. It is going to come on the basis only by a struggle for socialism, and specifically the fight for the working class to take into democratic public ownership all the key industries, the commanding heights of the economy. That is the only basis on which we will be able to actually win liberation. And then beyond that, we have to also point the vision beyond that. It's not going to be possible for any one country to become socialist is surrounded by the vicious powers of global capitalism. And that is why it can never be a project of socialism in one country. Socialism is an international project, or it is nothing at all. And that is why, as we call for independence and socialism in Puerto Rico, we have to join that call by the call for socialism in Puerto Rico, in the United States, and in all of Latin and North America, and internationally. And this struggle, as we have said already, and as our campaign is fighting for, this struggle must include the fight for demands like canceling all debt for working and poor people in Puerto Rico. Obviously, that goes hand in hand with our demand to cancel student debt and medical debt, obviously. And we want, as I said, fighting for free healthcare for all, and good union jobs for all, which includes Puerto Rico as well. And we have to say that again and again, that when we are talking about these demands, we are implicitly including Puerto Rico in our demands. And it is also crucial to connect this to the lessons from history. I mean, when we talk about Greece, we have to talk about the absolutely fatal and unforgivable mistakes made by Syriza, the left party that came to power in the wake of general strike after general strike in Greece, where the majority of the working class was ready to fight to actually throw over the yoke, to shed the yoke of the International Monetary Fund and of capitalism. But at that time, what did Syriza do? They tried to make deals with the capitalist class, and we saw what happened. We saw what happened. none of the debt has been canceled, and Greece is still in the economic debt spiral. What is the lesson here? No, the working class cannot make deals with the capitalist class. Why? For the simple reason that the capitalist class will never give us an inch. What they will instead do is go after us viciously every step of the way. They are going to be completely uncompromising and ruthless. And the only way we can win liberation for the working class, if we are serious about it, is for us to understand that no, there is no deal making that is happening with the capitalist class. We have to build revolutionary movements, and that is what we will need to win independence in Puerto Rico as well. That is not going to come on a silver platter for us. It will need to be powerful, powerful revolutionary movements, and it will only come in the context of mass movements, revolutionary movements overall in the United States as well. So all of these goals are absolutely combined. And just one of the last things I wanted to say is, we're talking about crypto barons. I mean, all of this, or the exploitation by crypto barons in Puerto Rico is linked with the fight right here and right now against AI billionaires and multimillionaires and against the data centers. Why? I mean, in general, it is of course linked because all working class fights are linked, but it is more than that. AI and crypto technology are beginning to converge, and in fact, there are estimates from the market themselves that say that the intersection, which is starting to happen, the intersection of AI and crypto could represent a collective $20 trillion of economy. Basically, what it will be is massive profits that will be pocketed by a few wealthy people. And then what will happen? We will be saddled with what? A giant recession. Because both AI and crypto represent the makings of giant economic bubbles, and the burden of those bubbles will be placed on working and poor people, just like we saw with the Great Recession when the subprime mortgage crisis went belly up. And we already saw crypto billionaire Sam Bankman-Fried. I don't know how many of you remember this. It happened a few years ago. He went to prison because, basically he committed fraud. He was a billionaire. The reason I'm mentioning him is to explain that the exploitation and the creation of the bubble of AI and crypto is very much a bipartisan project. Sam Bankman-Fried was the second largest individual donor to Democratic Party PACs for the 2022 US elections, with total donations from him coming up to almost $40 million. This is why it is very crucial that working people who are understanding this analysis, that for us, that you all join our campaign, because there is no other campaign in this midterm election year that brings our strategy, our approach, our understanding that having faith in the Democratic Party is a complete dead end for the working class, because both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are parties of capitalism. They serve the billionaire class, and that is why we absolutely have to come together around this campaign. And in this campaign, we are also demanding that when that bubble happens, because it's only a question of when and not if, when that bubble happens, our campaign is saying there is no way working people will agree to pay for it. No bailouts for Wall Street. Wall Street pays for the crisis Wall Street creates. And that is why I hope you all will join our campaign and join our efforts together. And also, I should just mention that our campaign, if we are able to win, will also be a huge breakthrough for building a new working class party in the United States. But I have to inject a note of sobriety here. We are up against not only Zionist money and AI money and crypto money in our election, we are also up against machinations by the Democratic and Republican parties together. I don't know if you all heard, but the Republican Party candidate who entered the race, Doug Basler, he openly said that he was recruited to run in this race in order to keep us out of the general election. In other words, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, they may compete for electoral seats, but they are absolutely unshakably aligned in crushing any working class efforts. And so the only way that we can be one of the top two vote getters in order to get into the general election, which we need to do in order to win the election, have a chance at winning the election, we will need an absolutely powerful fight. The next 2.5 months, weeks would have been disastrous. Next 2.5, that's too soon. The next 2.5 months, I'm dead serious, the next 2.5 months are do or die. We get one shot. It's a binary result. Either we get into the general election or we don't. It is that simple. There is nothing complicated about this. So if you want to have a fighting chance at having a fighter in the US Congress, at electing the first ever revolutionary socialist in the US Congress, then this is it. This is the time to fight for it so that we can actually get into the general election. Solidarity.
Thank you, Kshama. Yeah, as Kshama mentioned, the same crypto and AI billionaires that are making use of the tax haven laws in Puerto Rico are using some of that money that they're not paying in taxes, not some of it, a lot of it, to create PACs, political spending organizations, and they've actually dumped unprecedented levels of money into the primary elections that have happened so far this year in the United States. So they are using their wealth, which, again, this is not new, this is not surprising, this is what you predict would happen. They're using their wealth to try to maximize, increase their influence over the political system and to prevent people like Kshama, anyone that would threaten their profits, anyone that would threaten their tax exemption status, to eliminate them as a threat. And Kshama's the Democratic incumbent in District 9 that Kshama is running in has already received maximum donations from a huge long list of crypto PACs and AI PACs and CEOs and executives of these corporations. And so it takes money, it takes funding, it takes resources to run our campaign and to fight back against all of these deep-pocketed forces. Next I'm going to introduce Joe Sugru, who's going to give a financial appeal, and then we're going to have time for some discussion for members of the audience to come up and share comments or ask questions, after which our speakers will each have a chance to respond to the questions and comments from the audience. But before that, please join me in welcoming Joe Sugru. He participated in many of Kshama Sawant's Seattle City Council election campaigns and in the historic movements that she led for renters' rights. He has been a rank-and-file member of the Teachers Union for many years and has been a part of the effort to rebuild a fighting labor movement that is ready to take strike action. And he's now an organizer with Kshama's Independent Socialist Campaign for Congress. Welcome, Joe Sugru.
Thank you, Kaylin. And thank you, Kshama. Thank you, Jenaro. Thank you, Alejandro, for speaking today. As Kaylin mentioned, my name is Joe. I'm a music teacher, and I'm also with the Kshama for Congress campaign. And Kshama's campaign and myself are fighting, of course, for the right of Puerto Rican people to self-determination, to cancel the Puerto Rican debt and make Wall Street pay, as Kshama had mentioned, to abolish the Puerto Rican tax haven laws for the rich, and for free health care for all in the U.S., including in Puerto Rico, by taxing the rich. And the reality is that Kshama is also clear, as she had mentioned earlier, that the liberation of the Puerto Rican people cannot be achieved on the basis of capitalism either. And we can also not achieve socialism in just one country. But the struggle for self-determination must be combined with the struggle for socialism in Puerto Rico, in the United States, in all of Latin America, in North America, and internationally. And fighting for all of these demands will actually strengthen this fight. And I just couldn't agree more with so many of the things that were said today, including Jenaro saying the intention of the capitalists, of the U.S. imperialists, was never to extend democracy. This is the case with every time the capitalists and the U.S. imperialists are talking about extending, democracy internationally, and we don't accept that. And also, I think, just for a moment, speaking from a personal capacity also, Jenaro had mentioned, a lot of Puerto Rican people going to Hartford, Connecticut. And I grew up in Connecticut, and most of my mom's family is Cuban, and a lot of them have, married and become friends with Puerto Ricans over the decades as well. And yeah, had an incredible Puerto Rican restaurant in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and all these things. And the mainstream alternatives presented to the Puerto Rican people in their struggle for liberation are through the Democratic Party, and that's a load of bullshit. Whenever there is a rally for independence in Connecticut, for example, the mainstream alternatives are always bullshit gone through the Democratic Party, maybe the Republican Party, but the reality is, like these speakers have said, made wonderful points, that it was Obama that put forward the Promesa bill, that, this is a complete and total grab for the energy grid and all kinds of other utilities from the Puerto Rican people so that they could further privatize and further reap the benefits of these already rich assholes. And we don't accept that any one bit. And the reality is, too, that if Kshama were to be elected, people say, oh, well, she's only one out of 435 people in the House. Imagine, one out of 435, who cares? 435,000 people in the streets, organized by Kshama, calling for free healthcare for all by taxing the rich, including the Puerto Rican people. The Democrats won't do any of that, and that's why we have to get her elected. And so like Kaylin said, I'm going to talk for a moment, too, about resources for this campaign. Working people know you can't get anything done without money. And we are going up against the Zionist lobby, the pro-genocide lobby, the healthcare CEOs, Palantir, SpaceX, all of these people that are donating to our opponent, Adam Smith. And so I'm going to name some dollar amounts in a moment. And if you hear an amount you can donate today, please raise your hand, and then someone will help process that donation. Please donate today if you can. We have busy lives. I say all the time I'm going to do something, and then I forget to do it. And now that Kshama is on the ballot, we have an ambitious but necessary target of raising $75,000 this month. And we're on pace to do it, but we need your help. When Kshama was on the Seattle City Council, she did something unique in U.S. politics today. She refused to take the six-figure salary Seattle City Council members pay themselves, and instead, she only took the average wage of a worker she represented and after taxes donated that money to a solidarity fund, including going to strike funds. Yeah, that's all right. That's incredible, right? And this is because, unlike other politicians, when Kshama got elected, she didn't sell out and make a career for herself, but instead she went to war against the political establishment and led movements of thousands of working class people to fight for and win the $15 minimum wage and to tax Amazon and other wealthy corporations to fund affordable housing. And we need representatives like Kshama who lead movements and go on the offensive, not more gatekeepers who steer movements down dead-end paths. So the maximum amount somebody can donate is $3,500, and donations can be separated into monthly increments. So right now we have 3 months until the primary, so you can make a contribution once a month for 3 months. So all of that said, is there anybody here today that can donate $250 to our working class campaign, which would be $83 a month for the next 3 months?
Are you going to go up or down?
We're going to go down. Thank you so much. That's $500. Thank you so much. That's a huge deal. That's fantastic. Thank you. So Kshama's main opponent, genocidal Democrat Adam Smith. This guy's been in office for nearly 30 years, and he has been a general for the warmongering billionaires every single year he's been in office. He voted for the war in Iraq and countless of other wars in the Middle East. Adam Smith, he voted for the $906 billion in war funding this past December and to create and fund ICE. We can't accept this. One of his first acts in Congress was to cut $150 billion from Medicare and Medicaid, and in 2022, he voted to break the railroad strike. The labor movement can no longer support strike breakers. Billionaires, if your union does, get involved with our campaign and help us fight back against those endorsements. Adam Smith voted for tens of billions of dollars to fund the genocide in Gaza that continues to take place. And he's been rewarded for this. In his career, he has gotten $1.3 million from AIPAC and the Zionist lobby. Electing Kshama to Congress will be a complete game changer for the working class. Kshama's election will be an unprecedented breakthrough for the anti-war movement. She would use her office to organize working people across the country and pose a serious threat to the political establishment's war machine, just like she did on the Seattle City Council for 10 years. So all of that said, is there anyone here who can donate $100 today or $33 for the next 3 months? Thank you. Can anybody else match that? $100 today or $33 over the next 3 months? Awesome. Thank you so much. That's a huge deal. Thank you. Working people in the district and the whole country are sick and tired of both the Republican and Democratic Party. When we canvass in the district and people say, I don't do politics, we've often responded with, I totally get that. Politics is usually bullshit. And people stop and they're like, oh yeah, this person's listening to me. They get it. But we say, but Kshama Sawant is different. She has a track record of winning real gains like the $15 minimum wage, the Amazon tax, loads of renters' rights that no other politician is fighting for right now. And she's doing it independent of the Democratic Party. And then people go, okay, give me the clipboard. And they want to get involved, right? So our median donation is $25. Adam Smith's median donation is $1,000. Right. But we also have over 4,700 people who have donated to our campaign, including all 50 states and Washington, D.C., and of course, Puerto Rico. And so is there anybody here today that can donate any amount at all to be a part of that 4,700 donors? 25, thank you so much. 25, $10, thank you. 2 folks in the back. $5, even $1 goes a long way. So thank you very much. And I just could not be more excited to hear what others have to say during this discussion today. This is a completely important discussion. Thank you to the speakers, and also solidarity to everyone here and to the people of Puerto Rico. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you so much to everyone for your generous donations. So now we're going to have some time for discussion, for people to come up and ask questions to the speakers or share your own thoughts about the issues that they've been discussing. If you want to just raise your hands from your seat, I'll point to you and you can come up and speak from the microphone so that the people watching on the live stream are also able to hear the discussion. If you can try to keep your comments or questions to around 3 minutes so we can try to make sure everyone who wants to speak has a chance. Yeah, let's have some discussion. And I think I saw you. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so should I go?
Yes, if you could come up.
So, hi. I just want to bring a little bit of Washington State perspective to the Puerto Rican issue. I met Jenaro and Alejandro today, and it's been like amazing. The junta, the fiscal control board, they have a budget of roughly $200 million per year. You can correct me. $200 billion per year just for 8 people, lawyers, and they don't have a control. So they don't have, we don't have a way of control how much they really spend. And you know who's paying for that? It's not the federal government, it is the Puerto Rican people. That comes out of Puerto Rican taxes. And as a perspective, I was searching for some numbers. City of Olympia have an annual budget of $100 million. City of SeaTac have a roughly $120 million yearly budget. So how many things can we pay in Puerto Rico for $200 million per year? More for the university, more like healthcare that is like going down, housing, everything. So that's the first thing. So we need to put this in perspective because we think, oh, that's them and there's their issue. They are forcing us to pay for the oversight. And the second thing is, what is the name of the committee in Congress that is in charge of Puerto Rico? Is the Natural Resources. You know who's a ranking member of the Natural Resources Committee? One of the Washington State senators, I think it's Maria Campbell. So don't think that that's happening over there 4,000 miles from here, and we shouldn't care. So that we have people in the state that can do stuff about Puerto Rico. So I think I want to keep this in perspective. Everything you hear about Puerto Rico, how it can help, you can, write your senators, you can write your Congress people. So don't disconnect from what's happening there because it's also connected to what we have here. I just wanna.
I'm David Brookbank from Spokane, and I should have ridden over yesterday with Jenaro. Instead, I got on the bus and came over here this morning from Spokane. But I'd just like to hear some more being said about, the international implications of a socialist running in a high-profile race like this for the countries of Latin America, which the United States government intends to take down one after the other, from Mexico all the way down, the Isthmus of Central America and to the tip of the Americas. It's really crucial right now for those of us who have direct connections to the people of Nicaragua, the people of Cuba, the people of Puerto Rico, the people of Bolivia, all of which are under attack right now. And it's quite possible that the United States, as a way of taking attention from the fiasco of Trump's visit to China and the fiasco of the war in Iran, is going to take a series of rapid actions in 2 or 3 or more countries in Latin America. So just maybe a few more comments, both on that reality and the importance of a anti-imperialist international socialist like Kshama's campaign. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Paulie Giulianotti, and I just wanted to briefly comment on Enron, which was brought up by Kshama, and how Enron was so devastating, and the connection to gatekeepers. Back in 2023, I spoke at the Washington State Senate Ways and Means Committee to reveal that the Washington Coalition of Police Accountability, which is an organization that claims to fight for police accountability, representing oppressed people, they had accepted $100,000 from Arnold Ventures, founded by John Arnold, who received the largest ever cash bonus from Enron of $8 million in the final weeks of Enron before its collapse. So I thought that was really interesting, and it also relates to your comments as far as how billionaires and multimillionaires will use Puerto Ricans and usurp their power in order to turn it against the Puerto Rican people. So I just wanted to say thank you for being credible messengers. Thank you for bringing these stories here. I'm really fascinated to learn about it and to learn about how Puerto Rico in particular has suffered the fate of many island nations. Reminded me of what the American government has done in the Marshall Islands, testing nuclear weapons, what they have done to Hawaii, okay? So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Hi, I'm Brittany. I was just wondering if you all might be able to talk about a little bit more about the historic election that happened in Puerto Rico in 2024 and the party's strategy for elections and what the party is doing in Puerto Rico. Thank you.
I guess I'll start, and Alejandro, you can follow with everything I probably leave out. The Puerto Rican Independence Party, for the longest time, given the sheer brunt of U.S. repression against the independence movement, has always been somewhat of a very marginal movement when it comes to electoral politics. Now it's taller than me, right? No. All right, so it's been a very marginal movement in a lot of electoral politics in Puerto Rico. At its birth, we had like a 19% voter outcome after our party was founded. We're about to be 80 years old now. That's our 80th anniversary is coming up very soon in October. And it's a party that has been a recipient of all kinds of other independence movements that were fleeing repression, right? The nationalist movement and other kind of armed groups as well that, had different strategies that we didn't necessarily partake in, but that we were in solidarity when it really mattered, as many anti-colonial movements have had to endure over time. After that first election cycle, for the greater part of 60-something years probably, we as a party would only get like 2 or 3% of the vote. Maybe sometimes on good years we might get 4% of the vote. But in reality, the Independence Party has always been one of the most underrepresented, voter outcomes because of the fact that, it's often associated with left-wing movements, and the left often is divided over strategy. Probably something that I think we have to think about when we're thinking about, electing a socialist to Congress, right? So it wasn't only until recently that the neoliberal crisis brought Puerto Ricans to realize that we just have to put our differences aside, and we need to walk in a very limited fashion in unity through action, right? And the Puerto Rican Independence Party in 2020 got a historic 13% of the vote, and then a new party that was a left-wing progressive coalition called the Movimiento Victoria Ciudadana that Rafael Bernabe happens to be a part of. They got 14% of the vote. And we looked at each other. We saw that the governor won 32%. He won the election with 32% of the vote. And we thought, if we combine our efforts, we might actually have a multiplying effect. And we came together. We're different parties, but we were parties that were very much had a lot of overlap when it came to our positions. We were anti-neoliberal. We wanted to cancel the debt. We were for workers' rights. We wanted to embolden our healthcare system that has been gutted by the neoliberals. We wanted to do a lot of things together. We disagreed on some of the status issues, but when it came to issues that really concerned the working class, we came together and walked together. And what did we do? We did a strategy that in Puerto Rico electoral law, it does not allow for candidates to be elected through coalition efforts. So there's a lot of rules for parties to just be elected under. You have to have a governor candidate. You have to have a resident commissioner candidate. You have all kinds of rules that really divide us in meaningful ways. So we had to circumvent a lot of those rules by putting up a straw man or straw person to vote for. And we would then say to our colleagues the people we're running with, our running mates in the MFC, for example, that vote for them, don't vote for the one we put up. And it was a very creative strategy. We managed to become the second electoral force on the island. We are now the electoral opposition in Puerto Rico, and it's a real feat. Thank you, yes. And it happened greatly because of the diaspora. It happened obviously because of the things that we're doing there, but it also happened greatly because of the diaspora. The Puerto Rican diaspora tends to be very much more in favor of independence than people that live in Puerto Rico. A lot of it has to do with the fact that you don't really have employment, you don't have a position in Puerto Rico, you don't have really a way to live out your dreams in Puerto Rico unless you're connected to this duopoly that is very corrupt and connected to the capitalist class. If you're not connected to that, you have no, and because of it, then the diaspora tends to be very much in favor of this because they don't feel like they have a home in Puerto Rico. They don't have a way to develop themselves in meaningful ways. So now we're at the struggle again, and we're basically on all fronts. We are trying to occupy all fronts. That means the electoral front, that means in the streets, that means in the unions, that means in, maybe talking to Congress people, and it means that we have to be in every space. It also means that we have to speak the language of the working class, because it is the working classes themselves that were expulsed and were spat out to the United States to basically, live here in what they would consider an exile, right? Puerto Ricans want to go back, but they also want to go back in meaningful ways. Some people also want to stay here, but they also want to have a home there, right? So outside of the arguments that are economicista, right? Like the ones that are like purely economic, that are focused on your pocketbook, there's also something really, existential about this. We fear that Puerto Rico will fall to the capitalists. Hawaii, the nation of Hawaii, is over more than half of its population lives stateside, or lives in the other 49 states. It lives on the continent itself. They have been completely displaced. Puerto Ricans are also fearing that this capitalist model is going to displace them completely from the land. We often talk about land back in the abstract. This is a land back movement. This is a movement to give back to the Puerto Rican people the land that they've been expulsed from. So I went a little off, I went on a tangent a bit, but that was the strategy that got us to second place. So I think it's a strategy we can learn from to think about what it might look like getting Kshama elected. So if that's worth anything.
Yeah, I want to add a little bit more context into like what Jenaro shared here. I think specifically talking about, Jenaro spoke about the history of our party having 3-4% for many, many election cycles. And I think like there's some reasons for this, and I think that's important to like bring up and explain. And one of the things, like after the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico gets established in 1952, there is a huge repressive effort against independence movements that progresses for like that period of time imposed by the government of Puerto Rico, which is called the gag law. And what this does, like, it makes it illegal to portray or do certain actions that are seen in support of Puerto Rican independence. For example, this flag was illegal to have or to display anywhere. It was illegal to sing the national anthem. It was illegal to create art talking about our independence, our liberation. And this legacy, even though this repression didn't necessarily like last 50, 60 years, that memory is there, and that fear of this repression coming back, or people knowing that some of their family members were repressed, were put in jail for this, it creates a sort of like fear and be like, well, even if I support independence, if I want to be free, I'll just keep it to myself. I won't really be like out there talking about it, displaying it, out of fear for what could happen to me, what could happen to my family. So many people, even if they supported independence, are like, well, can't really be supporting the party because maybe that'll affect my life. But the Independence Party, even through this wave of repression, managed to stay put, to stay firm to their principles, and make the movement for Puerto Rican independence survive these repressive years and serve as this bastion of hope that sometime in the future we will be able to rise and actually fulfill our mission. And then another aspect is something that is also seen here in the United States. Our electoral system is a first past the post system. What this means is like the person that gets the most votes, no matter the amount of votes they get, is the person that gets elected. So even if you get 30% of the vote, 32, which happened with our previous governor, they are still elected. They're still the governor of Puerto Rico, even if they didn't get the support of the majority of the people. What this causes is a top two system, a two-party system, because if there's a candidate you do not want to be elected, your only option is to vote for whoever is the most likely to beat them. It creates this like play and strategic thing towards voting that doesn't necessarily relate to who represents your interest the most, just who is more likely to win, that you're the least bad, which is not like how we should be choosing who are the people making decisions to represent ourselves. And this happened in Puerto Rico for many, many years. Even people supported independence. There was somebody in the main two parties that they did not want to govern. They would vote for the opposite party instead of voting for the Independence Party, which they felt more deeply or in their heart. But as we spoke earlier, the economic crisis and all the disasters that have happened and the ways that both parties had like fully destroyed their chances of being seen as a hope for anything, so they both shows they're aligned with the colonial interest. The people see what their governors are doing and how their representatives are acting, and they eventually say, well, we can't keep this anymore, and they pushed away this strategic voting, and they're like, I'm gonna vote for whoever is actually in my interest because we need something different, we need a change, and this change was mainly driven by the youth that, like me, lived throughout this period of economic crisis. We've only lived through the economic recessions of the last 2 decades. And we see that our current system is not one that is there for us. And this rise with the Independence Party getting 13, 14%, and the the new, this broad leftist party also getting 14%, was mainly driven by the youth that came out in numbers not seen before. Like the youth historically has very low turnout in elections, massive numbers. And in the previous election, our candidate, or the candidate of this alliance with the broad leftist party, gets 31% of the vote. A percentage never seen before for a pro-independence candidate, and the first time ever in Puerto Rican history that another party gets a top 2 position, and that the pro-status quo party gets relegated to a 3rd place. And when they did polling, like previous to the election, they do polling in different age groups. You see that our candidate won in under 35. People under 35 voted for our candidate disproportionately compared to like other generations. But even then, people over 35, they still had massive support for our candidates. It doesn't mean that it's a generational thing that like people older than 35, they can't see the difference. It's just that they're entrenched with this, like constant, familiarity, tradition, and it's like it's different connections, different ways of speaking to people. But we can see this generational trend ongoing right now in Puerto Rico as people are suffering. When they did polling in high schools, Juan, our candidate, got 80% of the vote in like a bunch of different high schools around the island. So we see that this fear of independence is slowly disappearing, and people are yearning for freedom, yearning for a change, and I think something else is that it's become very apparent in the last 10 years. Like this quote I mentioned, I see the future is beautiful, there are no Puerto Ricans. People are seeing this existentialist character of the crisis. It's becoming more and more apparent that this is a fight for our existence. If we want Puerto Ricans to be here in the future, we have to fight for independence. There's no other option.
This was such a fantastic discussion, and I think this is the kind of discussion followed up by united action that we need on the left. We have so little of this. I mean, the left is all but collapsed in the United States, and these are small glimpses of, very, very tiny glimpses, really, of what is possible and what needs to be done. I really appreciate all the speakers who spoke, and also Jenaro and Alejandro. All of that was extremely interesting and fascinating to hear about the election and the strategy that was used. Just to respond to a couple of things, I appreciated Paul and Misa bringing up that this is not something that's happening far off. This is actually, not only is it related in terms of just the reality of capitalism being a global system on that scale, but there's actually concrete connections, the Enron and the Seattle Police Department connection. And, Misa, you mentioned Maria Cantwell. She has no intention, she or anybody else in her party, the Democratic Party, they have no intention of doing anything benign for the Puerto Rican people, let alone independence or even statehood. There's no intention of that at all. And in fact, Maria Cantwell is also the same person who also was one of the Democrats who voted to create ICE by voting for George W. Bush's Department of Homeland, the Homeland Security Act, which created ICE. And she also, by the way, she's been there long enough that she also voted for the Iraq War. And then she and Patty Murray, they both voted to create ICE. They're the two senators of Washington State. They both voted to create ICE, and they both have voted for tens of billions of dollars for the genocide in Gaza, along with, they're in the Senate, along with Congressmember Adam Smith, our opponent, who is in the House, and he also voted for all of those things, including the Iraq War. And so we are up against the same enemy, but it is very, very important for us to understand who that enemy is. Yes, it is capitalism as a whole. Global capitalism is our enemy. The capitalist class, the multimillionaires, the billionaires, the ones who benefit from the system and who have a stake in allowing in keeping the system intact, even though climate catastrophe is at our doorstep, and it is actually an existential crisis for humanity and other animals. Even so, they have a stake in keeping this system alive. Yes, they are our enemies. But the reason they are able to subjugate us is also because they have the state, the institutions of the state, and they have the political parties that do their bidding. And those political parties have other layers of gatekeepers. And at this moment, unfortunately, it's the overwhelming majority of the American labor leadership that is acting on behalf of the Democratic Party, and in some cases even on the behalf of the Republican Party. And by definition, if you're allying with the Democratic Party, then you're doing the bidding of the bosses. And that is the tragic situation that we're in the United States, where most of the union leadership is on the side of the bosses in some shape or form. And in fact, as we were having our meeting here, the Washington State Labor Council, which is the statewide labor leadership, they had their political, PAC convention where they do the endorsements. Guess whom they endorsed in our race? They endorsed Adam Smith. The only thing that has been reported, one of our members of Workers' Strike Back is in the statewide public sector union, and she heard about this. She said the only redeeming factor, if there is a redeeming factor, and you have to really stretch, you have to stretch your imagination to call something redeeming in this situation, but the only thing that I can report that is somewhat heartening is that apparently it was a very close vote and there was a fierce debate. So obviously there were people who were opposed to endorsing him. But at the same time, what is true is that none of the people, even who were against endorsing Adam Smith, invited us to be in that convention. Only Democratic Party campaigns were in that convention, and none of the labor leadership as so far is supporting our campaign. And it's a tragic situation for the working class, but it is a shameful situation as far as the labor leadership is concerned. And that is why our campaign is so crucial, and it is so important for us to understand who our enemies are. It is obviously capitalism, but it's not just some abstract entity. Capitalism's war, class war, perpetual class war against the working class, against the billions of ordinary people across the planet, including the animals and the resources, all of this is conducted through their proxies. And the Democratic and Republican Party obviously are, but it is also the gatekeepers like the labor leaders, NGO leaders. They are all the proxies, unfortunately, of the capitalist class. And that is why it is so crucial for all of us to unite around this campaign. And I really appreciated what Jenaro said. Yes, there will be disagreements because, of course, in any actual left, if the left is actually building, if the labor movement is actually building, then there should be political debates, because how else will we arrive at the best possible ideas? We cannot be an echo chamber. We have to have actual discussion and debate. And so, yes, there will be disagreements, but what is crucial is that we fight, especially those of us on the socialist left, we fight to build two things: maximum unity on a principled basis, but that is not an abstract notion either. It's not unity of leaders. It is maximum unity on a principled basis in order to rally the maximum possible section of the working class to fight for demands, offensive demands that we all agree about. That is what this campaign is about. This campaign is not about everybody agreeing on everything. This campaign is about agreeing. We do want agreement on defeating Adam Smith. We do want agreement on the idea, on the fact that it is not only about Adam Smith. If it's a Republican or another Democrat that gets elected, that is not a solution for the working class. And we need that clarity. We need all of you to volunteer along with us, because we have tremendous support out there in the district. As Joe was saying, sometimes people are willing to talk to us only after they find out that we are an independent campaign, because they are so disgusted by the Democrats and Republicans. So there is an enormous well of support in Washington State Congressional District 9, but in order to reach those people who will actually vote for this independent socialist campaign, we need the help of those people who already know about our campaign and agree that this is an important, it is the most important thing for the working class in our view this year, which is, first of all, to get through the primary into the general election. And that is the type of unity we are talking about, and I hope we can build this. And we have to be very clear that the Democratic Party has no intention of doing anything benign for the working class. The minimum wage nationally is still $7.25. So let's be clear, they have no intention of doing anything positive for the working class, and they certainly do not want Puerto Rican independence because they don't want another beacon of any type of working class independence in the Americas. Look at how they are going, how American imperialism, both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, doing the bidding of the billionaire class, how they are going after Cuba and Venezuela. And so the fight for this campaign is, as David correctly said, it is an international fight. Our fight to get the first ever revolutionary socialist elected to the US Congress is absolutely a national fight. It is the most important national campaign for the working class this year. But it is not only that, it is also an international fight. I have no doubt in my mind that if we were to actually win this election to elect the first ever revolutionary socialist to the US Congress, it will have international reverberations. It will raise the sights of and embolden the working class, certainly in all of the Americas, including Latin America, but also across the world. So we have a lot at stake here because there is potential to actually make some change. And so if the best way really at this moment of showing our solidarity with the working class in Puerto Rico, the working class in Cuba, the working class in Venezuela, and the working class in the United States is for us to do our level best and to make every possible sacrifice of time and money so that we can actually defeat the Democrats and Republicans and get into the general election. And let me end on this. The prospect of a revolutionary socialist, and not just any revolutionary socialist, but a revolutionary socialist who has a track record of defeating the billionaire class repeatedly and winning historic victories, that prospect is the stuff of nightmares for the billionaires. So let's make that nightmare come true. Solidarity.
We are getting close to the end of our program here. We're going to hear briefly from Justin, Kshama's campaign manager, about upcoming volunteer events, but I just want to encourage everyone to stick around because we want to take a group photo at the end with our speakers and everyone here in the audience and the Puerto Rican independence flag in the background. So if you want to be in that photo, hang around for just a couple minutes. And yeah, now I'm going to introduce Justin Baer. He is the campaign manager of our Kshama for Congress campaign, and he's also a member of Workers Strike Back, which is the nationwide organization that Kshama co-founded to help bring the same fighting class struggle strategies that she used to win victories here in Seattle to working people all around the country. So come on up, Justin.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, this will be short, but just a quick appeal before we head out. So this is kind of a stupid way to start, but I just watched the movie recently, but there's this famous quote from the Lord of the Rings movies. One does not simply walk into Mordor. So in the story, Mordor is supposed to be this like fortress of evil to protect the Lord Sauron. So you can't easily get in because the armies of evil will, defend it at all costs. But I was just thinking that one of the places that's more evil than Mordor has been Congress. And the attitude of the Democrats and Republicans to Puerto Rico is one example that shows this very clearly. Kshama's not running for Congress to join this fortress of evil, rather the exact opposite. If she's elected, she will use her position to lead mass movements against the capitalist state. That is why the Democratic and Republican parties will fight tooth and nail to keep Kshama out of Congress. And, it's because their role is to defend the status quo of exploitation and war at all costs. It's an uphill battle, but we do have a real shot to win if we fight. It will take a mass movement of hundreds, ideally thousands of volunteers coming out to build this campaign in order to win. And so we have these volunteer clipboards. I think Matthew is going to pass those around, and it has our upcoming volunteer events on it. Grassroots independent campaigns like ours rely on hundreds of volunteers getting involved if we're going to elect Kshama and take down a pro-war corporate lackey like Adam Smith. So whether you've done, one of our canvassing shifts before or not, I hope everyone here will sign up as a volunteer for something within the next week. If you've never done it before, it's really easy. We pair people up with very experienced campaign organizers, and you can learn from them the whole time. The single best opportunity to come out to is our volunteer day event coming up on Saturday, May 23rd. We'll have many people out all over the district at the same time building this campaign. We'll have rallies at the beginning in both Seattle and Renton, followed by going out to table in many locations around the district. So please sign up to get involved. And thank you very much.
I very much second that. In addition to Volunteer Day, which Justin just mentioned, if anyone is interested in Worker Strike Back, the organization that Kshama co-founded, we're having our national monthly Worker Strike Back meeting tomorrow on Zoom at noon Pacific time. The topic is Stop the Data Centers and AI Layoffs. If anyone is interested in checking that out, if you RSVP on the website, you can register and we'll send you the link for that. And then the next campaign town hall is going to be on June 7th. And the topic is the fight for good union jobs for all, related to the topic of AI and the data centers. So please pick up flyers for any of those events if you're interested. And so now before we go, let's get a group photo. I wonder if we can move this banner. Oh, yes. Does one of you want to?
From the Diaspora of the Independence Party. We have this documentary called Cuba After Castro. We're going to be screening it on May 30th on the Beacon Cinema at 6:30 p.m. So if you can make it there, that would be amazing. Thank you.
All right, so I was thinking we could try to move the banner